Hey everyone, so in this video we're going to have another look at one of those items in the setup menu, the input and output dialog box. So let's go into our I/O dialog, so setup and then I/O, input and output, and that will bring me this dialog box with a whole bunch of different tabs. Okay, so a good rule of thumb, anytime you're having issues with I/O, one thing that you can do is just go to your input and then click the default button, and also for output and click the default button. So that will often resolve any kind of input-output issues you might be having, like perhaps missing an input from your interface when you're trying to set the input on a track. So sometimes if you have a track and you click the input, you can't find the right input for your interface. Sometimes that problem will be resolved by going to I/O and then just hitting input tab and defaults, and then you will get all the correct input and output for your interface. We often might want to bus some signal over to a reverb aux input or a delay aux input. So those happen a lot. So one thing we can do is we might want dedicated bus paths, right? So a bus is sort of like just a cable connecting two tracks, and sometimes you just want it to have a nicer name. So you can rename the ones that are there, or you can go to New Path, and you will get a dialog box. And what you might want is a reverb bus, right? That's a stereo reverb, and then maybe another one that's for delay. And you might just want those always to be there and available. So you can hit create, and then you'll have a couple of buses called reverb and delay, which, where are they? There they are, right here. Then you'll have these two buses called reverb and delay. You can drag them around so that they're where you want them. So maybe at the top, and then you'll notice if I go and want to do a send to say that reverb, I have a bus called reverb. So if I close the session and then I make a new one from the dashboard, now those bus paths that have been renamed to reverb and delay are in my system's memory as last used for the I/O settings. So if I hit create now if I look at I'm going to add a track real quick here. So I'm going to put in a new audio track, and I will now have a send on a bus that's called reverb, or a send that's called delay. So my system saves the bus list and all the titles and all that I/O information, but if I open up a previous session, it will bring with it its own buses. So the titles in the buses are overwriting here my last used, which was the one that I had just created, right? So when we created a new path for reverb and delay, that worked for creating a new session, but when I opened up a recent session that had its own bus titles, right, its own bus settings, those overrode what was saved on my system. So the session comes with its own bus information. Now what doesn't get overwritten is the input and output list, which is why you get that funny dialogue sometimes saying, hey, your input and output setup that's on your system is different than what's being opened with the session. Are you cool with that? And then usually you say, okay, sure, go ahead. And then you move on and you can figure out the input and output. But your system holds on to the input and output whenever you open a session, but the session holds the bus settings, right? So input and output will be linked to your system memory, and the bus will be linked to the session information that's in that file. We can make custom names for almost any of these. So we made a reverb and delay bus, but we can also change our inputs. So maybe you have two inputs. So for instance, on my Apollo, there's two different inputs, right? There's two in here, and it combines them into a stereo pair. But if we click this down arrow, we'll see that it's really two mono inputs combined into a stereo. And we can rename these if we want to. So maybe in a particular session, you're using mic from your first input, and then you've got maybe a guitar or an instrument track on that one. And then if I save that and go over to my tracks and I make a new track, here's a new audio track right here. If I go to input, you'll notice now my interface has a name for the mic input, the first input, and the second one would be guitar or whatever. So you can make your own custom names for all of these. Okay, a couple other things in the input-output dialog. Okay, so if we click on the output tab here, we can see that there's a monitor path and an audition path. So right now those default to the same exact thing. And what that means is everything's going to default to coming out the main outputs on your interface. So that's my monitors left and right now, right? So sometimes you want your preview audio to be separate than what's coming out your monitors. Maybe you have a little headphone mix or something else that you want to use, or a separate set of monitors that you want to use to audition audio, and you can set that custom. So if your interface has an extra output or so, you can choose it. So maybe I could go out my line 3-4 here and get a separate path for auditioning audio. Now, what does auditioning audio entail? Well, anytime we preview audio from the clip list, so if I want to check out what some clip in here sounds like, it's going to default out the monitors, but you can choose to send it somewhere else when you preview that audio. It also affects whenever you listen to things in the workspace or a Soundbase workspace browser. So say that you want to check out some random audio in here, right? So maybe I don't want that to go to my main monitors. Maybe I just want to check things out on a pair of headphones that are on a different set of outputs. I can do that by changing that output path. So workspace browsers are preview audio. So that audio is always coming out wherever you have set the audition path to. So clip list, workspace, also audio suite previews. So say you're going to add something with audio suite that you want to preview. This preview feature with the little speaker, right, wherever it might be set on, when you click on that, that's also coming out the audition path. And let's see if there's any others. Oh yes, in the file import audio, when you preview audio here, that's also coming out the audition path. So if you want a separate place to check out or preview audio coming out of Pro Tools, that's the audition path. Okay, last thing, if we click the bus tab, the default output bus is another one that you might want to customize occasionally. It sets what the output is going to be on new tracks. So typically you want that to come out your main outputs, right? 1 and 2, which is what this is set to, but there's a chance you're going to want that to be something else, right? When I make a new track, so here's my new track dialog, when I hit create, it has an automatic output here. What if you have a set of drum tracks or something that you're going to create, brand new tracks, you're going to send them to a submix. You might want for a moment to change the default output bus to that submix, or maybe you're going to make a lot of tracks and they're all going to go to one mix, and then something else later on is going to go somewhere else. What you want to do is you can set this to a specific output. So maybe you have a bus that you've created where you're going to put all the drums on one aux input bus, right? So the output of all those new tracks that you create will automatically go there for that moment, and then you can just switch the output bus again if you need it to go elsewhere. So this is where you can choose what output your new tracks will automatically have. And that's pretty much it. So we'll see you in the next one.